The morning was soft, the kind of morning where the air smells like dew and possibility. My son, Ethan, 8 years old, was sprawled in our front yard, his hands buried in a pile of leaves he'd raked into a lopsided fort. He was building a castle for the squirrels, he said, his voice bright with the kind of imagination that makes you believe the world might still be good. Twigs, pinnacones, and a few mismatched stones formed the walls, and he'd even dragged out a blue plastic bucket to serve as a moat. I watched from the kitchen window, a half-peeled orange in my hand, smiling at the way his tongue poked out in concentration. This was our routine, Ethan creating tiny worlds, me marveling at how a boy so small could dream so big. Then I saw her, Margaret Voss, HOA president, striding across the cul-de-sac like a general inspecting a battlefield. Her navy blazer was crisp, her silver hair pulled into a bun so tight it looked like it was holding her face together. She carried a tablet, her fingers tapping with the precision of a metronome, and her eyes were locked on Ethan's leaf pile. I knew that look. It wasn't curiosity, it was judgment. I set the orange down, wiped my hands, and stepped onto the porch. "Morning, Margaret," I called, keeping my voice light but firm. "Something wrong?" She didn't look at me, not at first. Her gaze stayed fixed on Ethan's creation, her lips pursing like she'd bitten into something sour. "This," she said, gesturing at the pile without breaking her stare, "is a violation. Section 2.4 of the HOA Covenant clearly states, no organic debris may be left in visible areas of the property." I blinked, then lofted a sharp, involuntary sound. "It's a pile of leaves, Margaret. He's playing. Kids do that." She finally turned to me, her eyes cold behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Rules don't bend for sentiment, Sarah. That pile is an eyesore. It disrupts the aesthetic uniformity of Willow Creek." She tapped her tablet, pulling up a photo she'd apparently taken yesterday of Ethan's earlier attempt at a leaf fort. "This is the second instance. You were warned." "Warned?" I stepped off the porch, my bare feet cold against the concrete. "You sent a form letter about yard maintenance without even mentioning him by name. He's 8, not a landscaping crew." Margaret's smile was thin, practiced, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. "The HOA doesn't make exceptions for age. If you can't comply, we'll handle it ourselves. Fines start at $100 per day after 48 hours. She turned, her heels clicking on the sidewalk, each step a punctuation mark to her authority. Ethan looked up, his hands still clutching a twig. "Mom, is my castle bad?" I knelt beside him, brushing a leaf from his hair. "No, buddy. Your castle's perfect. Some people just don't like squirrels," he giggled. But his eyes flicked toward Margaret's retreating figure, and I saw the flicker of worry. That flicker lit something in Messamething hot and unyielding. I didn't know it then, but that was the moment the fight began. Margaret wasn't just enforcing rules, she was declaring war on my son's joy. And I'd tear down her empire of clipboards and covenants before I let her dim his light. The next day, the letter arrived. It was on crisp HOA letterhead, sealed with a wax stamp like some medieval decree. Notice of non-compliance, it read, citing Ethan's leaf pile as a visual nuisance and demanding its removal by noon tomorrow, or face corrective action. I crumpled it, then smoothed it out, staring at the words as if they'd reveal some hidden meaning. They didn't. They were just Margaret's voice on paper, cold and unyielding. I called her office, expecting a secretary, but Margaret answered herself, her tone clipped. "Sarah, I trust you received the notice." "I did," I said, keeping my voice steady. "And I'm wondering why you're treating a child's playtime like a federal offense." "Rules are rules," she replied, as if that explained everything. "Willow Creek's standards are what keep property values high. If you don't like it, you're free to sell." "Sell?" I laughed, bitter. "This is my home, Margaret. My son's home. You don't get to push us out because he plays in his own yard." "Then comply," she said, and hung up. I stood there, phone still in hand, the silence buzzing in my ears. Ethan was outside again, adding a drawbridge to his leaf fort, a plank of cardboard he'd painted with crayons. I wanted to pull him inside, shield him from whatever Margaret was planning, but I didn't. I let him play. I let him be a kid. Because if I stopped him, she'd already won. That evening, a man in a green vest showed up, clipboard in hand. snapping photos of Ethan's pile like it was evidence in a crime scene. He didn't speak to me, just muttered into a walkie-talkie and left. I watched him go, my stomach twisting. This wasn't about leaves anymore. It was about control. The next morning, I checked the HOA's online portal. A new entry had appeared in the budget. Yard debris mitigation, $2,000. Vendor, ClearPath Solutions. My hands shook as I read it. Mitigation. For leaves. I Googled the vendor. ClearPath specialized in landscape restoration using heavy-duty equipment, blowers, shredders, even chemical sprays for stubborn organic matter. My heart sank. Ethan was out there now, humming as he stacked pinnacones. I wasn't going to let Margaret's hired muscle anywhere near him. I marched to her house, 3 blocks away. A brick colonial with a lawn so perfect it looked like plastic. She answered the door in a silk scarf, her expression a mix of surprise and annoyance. "Sarah, this is inappropriate." "No, what's inappropriate is you budgeting industrial equipment to bulldoze a child's leaf pile," I said, holding up a printout of the budget line. "What's next, Margaret? A SWAT team for his Lego towers?" She didn't flinch. "You're being dramatic. The board approved the measure to maintain standards. If you'd cleaned it up, we wouldn't be here." "It's his yard," I snapped. "My property line extends to the sidewalk. You have no jurisdiction." Her eyes narrowed. "The HOA governs all visible areas. You'll see the invoice for the cleanup if you don't comply by tomorrow." She shut the door. I stood there, pulse pounding, the printout crumpling in my fist. I wanted to scream, to break something, but I didn't. I went home, kissed Ethan's forehead, and started digging. If Margaret wanted a fight, I'd give her one she'd never forget. 2 days later, the air felt wrong to still, like the world was holding its breath. Ethan was outside again. His leaf castle now a sprawling kingdom with a guard tower made of sticks. He was singing to himself, oblivious to the storm brewing. I was on the phone with a lawyer friend, asking about HOA overreach, when I heard the engine. A low, grinding rumble, like a beast waking up. I dropped the phone and ran to the window. A truck was parked across the street, its bed loaded with industrial leaf blowers and what looked like a pesticide sprayer. 2 men in ClearPath vests were unloading equipment, and standing beside them, tablet in hand, was Margaret. She wasn't smiling, but her posture screamed triumph, shoulders back, chin high, like a queen surveying her conquest. I sprinted outside, bare feet slapping the pavement. "What the hell is this?" I shouted, planting myself between the truck and Ethan's pile. Margaret didn't look at me. "ClearPath is performing a scheduled cleanup," she said, tapping her tablet. "You were warned, Sarah." "Warned?" I stepped closer, my voice shaking with rage. "This is my property. You can't just roll in with a chemical sprayer, and it's an HOA-approved operation." She cut me off, her voice flat. "Section 5.3 allows for immediate remediation of non-compliant debris." Ethan looked up, his eyes wide. "Mom, are they taking my castle?" I turned to him, forcing a smile. "No, buddy, they're not touching it." I faced Margaret again, my voice low. "Call them off. Now." She tilted her head, her expression unreadable. "You had 48 hours. You chose defiance. This is the consequence." One of the workers started the sprayer, a hissing sound filling the air. I smelled it then, sharp, chemical, like bleach mixed with something worse. I didn't think. I just acted. I grabbed Ethan, pulling him behind me, and shouted, "You spray that anywhere near my son, and I'll have you arrested for endangerment." The worker hesitated, looking at Margaret. She waved a hand, dismissive. "Proceed." I don't know what made me move faster, instinct or fury. I shoved Ethan toward the house, yelling, "Get inside." Now he ran, his sneakers slipping on the grass. I turned back just as the worker aimed the sprayer at the leaf pile. The liquid hit the ground, a fine mist that burned my nose even from 10 feet away. The leaves hissed, curling and blackening, as if they were burning without flame. I screamed, "Stop it." The worker froze, but Margaret didn't. She stepped forward, her voice calm but venomous. "You're making a scene, Sarah. This could have been avoided." Avoided? I was shaking now, my hands balled into fists. "You're spraying chemicals in my yard, near my child, over leaves. You think this is about aesthetics? This is about you needing to feel powerful." Her eyes flickered, just for a second, but she recovered quickly. "Take it up with the board," she said, turning away. I didn't let her. I grabbed her arm, not hard, but enough to make her stop. "You don't get to walk away from this. You're going to answer for it." She yanked her arm free, her face twisting. "Touch me again, and I'll have you cited for assault." I laughed, loud and bitter. "Good. Cite me. Record it. Let everyone see what you're doing to a kid's playtime." Neighbors were watching now, phones out, recording. "Good. Let them see Margaret Voss, HOA Tyrant, destroying a child's leaf fort with industrial chemicals. Let them see her stand there, unmoved, as the air filled with the stench of her victory." That night, I sat on Ethan's bed, his small hand clutching mine. "Why did she break my castle, Mom?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Some people think rules are more important than people, but we're going to show her she's wrong." He nodded, his eyes heavy with trust. I kissed his forehead, then went to my laptop. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was a mother with a mission. Margaret had started this, but I was going to finish it. I spent the next 3 hours digging through the HOA's online records. Password protected, sure, but I'd worked in IT before Ethan was born. Basic firewalls were child's play. I found the budget, the vendor contract, the meeting minutes where Margaret pushed for proactive debris management. No mention of safety protocols, no environmental permits. Just a line item for $2,000 and a note. Approved unanimously. Unanimously, my ass. Half the board was her cronies, the other half too scared to say no. I called ClearPath Solutions at dawn, my voice steady despite the rage bubbling inside. "This is Sarah Bennett, resident of Willow Creek. Your team sprayed chemicals in my yard yesterday, near my 8-year-old son. I need to know what was in that sprayer and who authorized it." The man on the other end stammered, clearly unprepared. Mum, we followed HOA orders. Ms. Voss signed the contract herself." "What was the chemical?" I pressed. "It's EcoClear, a biodegradable herbicide. Safe for general use, but what?" I snapped. "It's not meant for residential yards without dilution. We assumed the HOA had cleared it." I recorded every word. Then I called the local news. By noon, a reporter was in my driveway, her cameraman filming the blackened remains of Ethan's leaf pile. I held up a photo of him building it, his smile wide and unguarded. "This is what the HOA called a nuisance," I said, my voice steady. "This is what they destroyed with industrial chemicals, no warning. No regard for a child playing 10 feet away. Margaret Voss ordered this, and I'm not stopping until she's held accountable." The story aired that night. By morning, it was trending on X, with hashtags like Leafgate and Hotarani. Neighbors started posting photos of their kids' chalk drawings, sandcastles, even stick forts. With captions like "Margaret, is this next?" The cul-de-sac became a gallery of defiance leaf piles, twig sculptures, even a cardboard dragon Ethan's friend Mia made. Margaret thought she could silence us with a sprayer. She was about to learn what happens when you push a community too far. Margaret didn't back down. She doubled down. At an emergency HOA meeting, streamed live on the community's private forum, she stood at a podium, her voice smooth as glass. "The incident with the Bennett property was unfortunate, but compliance is non-negotiable. Organic debris invites pests, lowers property values, and disrupts our community's harmony. We urge residents to cease these displays of rebellion." Rebellion. She said it like we were storming her castle with pitchforks. I stood in my living room, watching the stream, my hands shaking. Ethan was asleep upstairs, his latest leaf pilly a small one, rebuilt in Secrethiddon under a tarp in the backyard. I wasn't going to let her touch it again. The phone rang. It was Mia's mom, Lisa, her voice low. "Sarah, check your mailbox." I stepped outside, the night air cold against my skin. Tucked inside was an unsigned flyer. "Cease unauthorized yard displays, or face fines up to $500 per day. HOA Section 7.2. I laughed, then taped it to my front door, right next to a blown-up photo of Ethan's destroyed pile. Under it, I wrote in black marker, "You broke his castle. You can't break us." By noon, the cul-de-sac was alive. Kids were building leaf forts, parents snapping photos, neighbors bringing coffee and donuts, like it was a block party. Someone set up a speaker, playing Sweet Child O' Mine. Ethan ran out, his eyes wide with wonder. "Mom, look, they're all making castles." I hugged him, my throat tight. "Yeah, buddy, they're fighting for you." Margaret drove by an hour later, her SUV slowing as she took in the scene. She didn't stop, didn't get out, but I saw her face through the tinted window. For the first time, she looked rattled. Good. She should be. The cul-de-sac hummed with defiance. By the third day of what the neighbors were calling the Leaf Rebellion, every yard on our block sported some kind of creation leaf piles shaped like spaceships. Twig teepees, pinnacone mazes. Ethan's new castle, rebuilt under a tarp in our backyard, had grown into a sprawling fortress with battlements made of sticks he and Mia had collected from the park. He was out there now, 8 years old and beaming, directing his friends like a tiny architect as they added a secret tunnel with rolled-up newspaper. I watched from the porch, my heart caught between pride and dread. The community was rallying, but Margaret wasn't one to let defiance go unanswered. Her silence since driving by yesterday felt like the quiet before a coiled snake strikes. I sipped my coffee, scanning the street. Lisa, Mia's mom, was taping a poster to her mailbox, a photo of Ethan's original leaf pile with the caption, "This was a castle, not a crime." Across the street, Mr. Callahan, a retired landscaper, had built a leaf dragon that spanned his entire lawn, complete with red bottle caps for eyes. Even the Wilsons, who usually kept to themselves, had let their twins scatter leaves into a heart shape with "For Ethan" written in chalk. The air smelled of autumn and resistance, and for a moment, I let myself believe we were winning. Then I heard a low growl of an engine, different from the ClearPath truck, but no less ominous. A white van rolled into the cul-de-sac, unmarked except for a small logo on the side, EnviroSafe Solutions. 2 men in hazmat suits stepped out, unloading what looked like a high-pressure sprayer attached to a metal canister. My stomach dropped. I set my coffee down and stepped off the porch, my bare feet cold against the pavement. "What's this?" I called, striding toward the van. The men didn't answer, just kept working, their faces hidden behind visors. I turned to see Margaret emerging from her SUV, parked just outside the cul-de-sac. She wore her navy blazer, her tablet glowing in her hands, and her expression was calm to calm, like a predator that knows its prey is cornered. "Sarah," she said, her voice smooth as ice, "this is a follow-up remediation. The board has authorized EnviroSafe to address the ongoing debris violation." "Debris?" I gestured at the yards around us. "These are kids' projects. Art, you can't just spray more chemicals. The HOA has the authority to maintain community standards," she interrupted, tapping her tablet. "Section 8.1 permits immediate action for persistent noncompliance. You've had ample warning." I stepped closer, my voice shaking with barely contained rage. "You sent one letter and sprayed my yard without consent. Now you're back with hazmat suits. What's in that canister, Margaret?" She didn't flinch. "A safe, EPA-approved solution to clear organic matter and prevent pest infestation. Your refusal to comply has forced our hand." Ethan's voice cut through the air. "Mom, are they going to break my new castle?" He was standing at the edge of our yard, his friends behind him, their faces a mix of fear and confusion. Mia clutched a stick like a sword, her eyes narrowed at Margaret. I turned to him, forcing my voice to stay steady. "No, buddy, they're not touching anything." I faced Margaret again, my hands balled into fists. "Call them off. This is my property." Her lips twitched, almost a smile. "The visible areas are under HOA jurisdiction. You know this, Sarah. Step aside, or you'll be cited for obstruction." One of the workers flipped a switch on the sprayer, and it whined to life, a high-pitched hiss that made my skin crawl. The smell hit me sharp, acrid, like ammonia mixed with something metallic. I didn't think. I just moved, planting myself between the worker and Ethan's backyard fort. "You spray that anywhere near my son, and I'll have you arrested for reckless endangerment." The worker hesitated, glancing at Margaret. She waved a hand, dismissive. "Proceed." I screamed, "Ethan, get inside." He froze, his eyes wide, then bolted for the house, Mia and the other kids scrambling after him. I turned back just as the worker aimed the sprayer at the ground near my yard. The mist hit the grass, and I saw tiny sparks, like static, where the liquid touched the leaves. The grass sizzled, turning brown and curling inward, and the smell grew stronger, burning my throat. "Stop!" I roared, lunging toward the worker. He stumbled back, the sprayer jerking upward, and a fine mist grazed my arm. It stung, sharp and immediate, like 1,000 needles. I gasped, clutching my arm, but I didn't back down. "You're spraying poison in a residential neighborhood." Margaret stepped forward, her voice cold. "It's a controlled application. You're overreacting, Sarah. Move, or I'll call the authorities." I laughed, a raw, bitter sound. "Good. Call them. Let them see you poisoning kids' play areas over leaves." Neighbors were spilling out now, phones raised, recording. Lisa ran up, her face pale. "Sarah, your armpit's red." I glanced down. My skin was blotchy, swelling where the mist had hit. I didn't care. I pointed at Margaret. "You ordered this. You knew kids were out here. You're not just breaking ruthlessly or breaking people." Her eyes flickered, just for a second, but she recovered quickly. "You're trespassing on an HOA operation," she said, turning to the workers. "Continue." I don't know what snapped in Meffury, fear, or the sight of Ethan peeking out the window. His face pressed against the glass. I grabbed the sprayer's hose, yanking it from the worker's hands. The machine sputtered, liquid dripping onto the pavement, where it hissed and smoked. The worker shouted, but I didn't let go. "You want to clean up leaves? You say rake. Not this." Margaret's face twisted, her composure cracking. "That's vandalism, Sarah. You'll pay for that equipment." I dropped the hose, my arm throbbing, my voice low and steady. "And you'll pay for what you're doing to my son. To all of us." The workers backed off, clearly rattled, but Margaret didn't. She pulled out her phone, dialing with deliberate calm. "Yes, this is Margaret Voss, Willow Creek HOA. We have a resident obstructing a board-approved operation. Send an officer." I stood my ground, my heart pounding. Neighbors were shouting now, some filming, others crowding closer. "Mr. Callahan yelled, you can't spray that crap near our kids." Lisa was on her phone, calling the news crew that had covered the first story. The cul-de-sac was chaos, and in the center of it, Margaret stood like a statue. Her eyes locked on mine. "You think you're untouchable," I said, my voice cutting through the noise. "You think your rules make you a queen. But you just lit a match, Margaret, and this whole neighborhood's about to burn." The police arrived 20 minutes later, a single cruiser with an officer who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. By then, the EnviroSafe workers had packed up, their sprayers silent but the damaged donapitches of dead grass, blackened leaves, and the lingering stench of chemicals. My arm was swollen, a rash spreading from wrist to elbow, but I refused Lisa's offer to drive me to urgent care. I wasn't leaving until Margaret faced consequences. The officer, a stocky man named Torres, took statements. Margaret spoke first, her voice dripping with authority. "This resident, Sarah Bennett, assaulted my contractors and damaged HOA property. She's been non-compliant for weeks, inciting unrest." I laughed, holding up my arm. "Assaulted? They sprayed me with whatever's in that canister. Look at my skin. They did this in a yard where kids play, on her orders." Torres frowned, scribbling notes. "What's the chemical?" Margaret hesitated, just long enough for me to pounce. "She doesn't even know. She signed a contract for an EPA-approved solution without checking. Ask her for the safety data sheet." Torres turned to her. "Ma'am." She tapped her tablet, her fingers shaking slightly. "It's EcoClear, a biodegradable herbicide. Perfectly safe when applied correctly." "Safe," I snapped, pointing at the dead grass. "That's what safe looks like to you." My son was 10 feet away. Torres sighed, clearly out of his depth. "I'll need to see the contract and the chemicals documentation. For now, no more spraying until this is cleared up." Margaret's jaw tightened, but she nodded. "Of course, officer." He left, promising to follow up, but I knew this wasn't over. Margaret didn't look at me as she climbed into her SUV, but her silence was louder than any threat. She was regrouping, planning her next move. I went inside, my arm throbbing, and found Ethan curled up on the couch, his knees to his chest. "Mom, is my new castle okay?" he asked, his voice small. I sat beside him, pulling him close. "It's safe, buddy, and we're going to make sure it stays that way." He nodded, but his eyes were heavy with worry. I kissed his forehead, then grabbed my laptop. Margaret had escalated, and I wasn't going to let her control the narrative. I uploaded the videos neighbors had sent Margaret giving the order, the sprayer hissing, my arm swelling. I posted them on X with a caption, "This is what the Willow Creek HOA calls community standards." They sprayed chemicals near kids over a leaf pile. Leafgate stopped Margaret. By midnight, the post had thousands of shares. Strangers were commenting, offering legal advice, sharing their own HOA horror stories. A local environmental group reached out, warning that EcoClear was banned in some counties for its toxicity when undiluted. I saved every message, every screenshot. Margaret thought she could hide behind her tablet and her title. I was about to drag her into the light. The next morning, I woke to a pounding on my door. It was Lisa, her face pale, holding a flyer. "They're doubling down, Sarah." I took it, my hands trembling. It was another unsigned HOA notice, typed in that same cold font, due to ongoing violations. All unauthorized yard displays must be removed within 24 hours. Non-compliance will result in fines and potential lien proceedings. Section 9.4. At the bottom, in bold, community harmony requires sacrifice. Sacrifice. I crumpled the paper. "She's threatening our homes now." Lisa nodded. "They slipped these into every mailbox on the block. People are scared, Sarah. Not everyone can afford a $500 fine." I looked out the window. Ethan was in the backyard, guarding his leaf fort like a sentinel, his small hands clutching a stick. I wasn't scared anymore. I was furious. I grabbed my phone and hit record, standing on my porch. Margaret Voss and the Willow Creek HOA just threatened to fine us for letting our kids play. They sprayed chemicals in my yard, burned my skin, and now they want us to sacrifice our freedom. This isn't about leaves. It's about control, and we're not bowing down. I posted the video, tagging every local news outlet I could think of. By noon, the cul-de-sac was a battlefield. Neighbors were out, rebuilding their kids' creations, leaf castles, stick forts, even a giant pinnacone smiley face. A news van parked at the corner, its reporter interviewing Mr. Callahan about his leaf dragon. Ethan ran up, holding a twig crown he'd made. "Mom, can I show them my castle?" I hugged him, my throat tight. "Go for it, buddy." He led the reporter to the backyard, explaining every detail of his fourth secret tunnel. The guard tower, the moat that was just a ditch he'd dug. The reporter smiled, but her eyes were sharp, taking in the dead grass nearby. "Is this where they sprayed?" she asked. I nodded, showing her my arm, now blistered and raw. "Right here." Margaret Voss gave the order. The story aired that night, and the internet exploded. Leafgate trended nationally, with memes of Margaret as a cartoon villain wielding a sprayer. A lawyer from the city offered to represent me pro bono, citing HOA overreach and potential environmental violations. But Margaret wasn't done. She released a statement on the HOA website, her words dripping with false sympathy. "We regret any distress caused by necessary maintenance. The Bennett family's actions have disrupted our community's peace. We urge residents to comply for the sake of harmony." Harmony. She kept using that word, like a spell she thought would make us forget the smell of her chemicals. The sting on my skin, the fear in Ethan's eyes. I wasn't going to let her rewrite this. I called the environmental group, sending them the videos and the vendor contract I dug up from the HOAS records. They confirmed EcoClear was a restricted substance, requiring permits Margaret didn't have. I filed a complaint with the state's environmental agency, attaching every document, every photo, every frame of her giving that nod to spray. Then came the retaliation. The next morning, I found a new notice taped to my door. Emergency HOA review. Sarah Bennett is under investigation for inciting unrest and damaging community property. Removal from the association registry pending vote. It wasn't signed, but it reeked of Margaret, her font, her phrasing, her venom. I didn't crumple it this time. I taped it to my mailbox next to a new poster of Ethan's fort, enlarged and laminated. Under it, I wrote in red marker, "You burned my yard. You can't burn my voice." By noon, neighbors had added their own Messageslief stick, cast line chalk across my driveway. Ethan watched, his eyes bright. "Mom, they're helping us." I nodded, fighting the tears in my throat. Yeah, buddy, they're fighting for all of us. The crisis hit on the worst day for it to happen. It was a Saturday, bright and crisp, the kind of day made for kids to be kids. Ethan was outside, his leaf fort now a masterpiece, surrounded by smaller creations from his friends. They'd named it Fort Squirrel, and Mia had painted a sign with a cartoon squirrel holding a crown. The kids were laughing, their laughter filling the air, and for a moment, I let myself breathe. The news coverage was gaining traction, the environmental complaint was moving forward, and Margaret's grip was slipping. I thought we were turning the tide. Then I heard the Angonus multiple this time, a chorus of growls that froze my blood. I ran to the window, my heart in my throat. 2 EnviroSafe vans pulled into the cul-de-sac, followed by a third vehicle, a black SUV with tinted windows. 4 workers in hazmat suits stepped out, each carrying a sprayer. But what made my stomach lurch was the canisters. They weren't the standard ones from before. These were larger, with red hazard labels I could see from my porch. Margaret stepped out of the SUV, her blazer replaced by a high-vis vest, her tablet glowing like a weapon in her hand. I sprinted outside, my voice raw. What the hell is this, Margaret? You were told no more spraying. She didn't look at me, her voice calm but edged with steel. This is a board-mandated emergency cleanup. The debris has escalated, Sarah, and it's attracting vermin. We're protecting the community standard. Vermin, I gestured at Fort Squirrel, where Ethan and Mia were still playing, oblivious. That's a kid's fort. You're bringing hazmat suits and hazard canisters near children? She tapped her tablet, her eyes cold. EcoClear Plus. Stronger, faster results. We're within our rights. I stepped in front of her, blocking her path to my yard. You don't have permits. I checked. The state's investigating you for the last spray. Back off now. Her lips twitched, that smug smirk creeping through. You think a complaint stops progress? The HOA is the law here, Sarah. Step aside. I didn't. I turned to the workers, shouting, you know what happened last time. You burned my skin. You think you're safe spraying that near kids? One of them shifted uncomfortably, but Margaret waved her hand. Proceed. I screamed, Ethan, run inside. He looked up, his eyes wide, and bolted for the yard. Mia trailing him. But they weren't fast enough. One worker aimed the sprayer at Fort Squirrel, and the mist came thick heavy, shimmering in the sunlight. It hit the leaf pile, and I saw it ignite with flames, but with a chemical glow, the leaves curling and melting into a black sludge. The smell was unbearable, like acid eating through metal, and Ethan coughed, stumbling as he reached the porch. I roared, charging the worker. I didn't touch him. He grabbed the hose, yanking it free. The sprayer sputtered, liquid splashing onto my hands. It burned instantly, my skin blistering, but I didn't let go. You're poisoning my son, I yelled, throwing the hose to the ground. Margaret stepped forward, her voice icy. You're assaulting contractors again, Sarah. This will be in court by tomorrow. I held up my hands, red and raw, tears streaming down my face. You burned me. You're burning my son's world. You nodded to spray that knowing he was there. She didn't deny it. She just stood there, tablet in hand, as Ethan coughed on the porch, his small body shaking. Lisa ran to him, pulling him inside, while neighbors screamed and filmed. Mr. Callahan grabbed a garden hose, spraying water at the sludge, but it only spread the smell, the ground sizzling. I pointed at Margaret, my voice breaking but strong. You did this. You chose this. And I swear, I'll make sure the world knows your name. Sirens wailed in the distance. Neighbors were pouring out now, some filming, others shouting. Someone threw a pinacone at the van, a small act of fury. I stood there, my hands burning, my arm throbbing, my heart breaking, and locked eyes with Margaret. You think this is over? I said, my voice low. You just turned a mother into a weapon. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and fear, a sterile coldness that clung to my skin as I sat beside Ethan's bed. He was asleep, his small chest rising and falling under a thin white blanket, an oxygen mask fogging with each breath. The doctors called it chemical irritation, his lungs inflamed from the EcoClear Plus mist that had drifted across the yard. My hands, bandaged from the burns, ached as I gripped his fingers, careful not to wake him. My arm was worse, the rash now a patchwork of blisters that itched and burned. But it was nothing compared to the fire in my chest. Margaret Voss had done this. She'd stood there, tablet in hand, and nodded as poison filled the air my son breathed. She thought she'd won, that her rules would bury us. She was wrong. I opened my laptop, the hospital's fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, and checked the X posts. The video I'd posted me yanking the sprayer hose, Ethan coughing. The ground sizzling had millions of views now. Comments poured in. This is criminal. Leafgate is bigger than Leves. It's about power. A local environmental lawyer had messaged me, offering to file a class action suit against the HOA for illegal chemical use. The state's environmental agency had launched an investigation, citing my complaint about EcoClear Plus's restricted status. The news was running the story on a loop, with footage of Fort Squirrel melting into sludge and neighbors chanting, "No more Voss." But Margaret wasn't silent. She'd posted a statement on the HOA website. Her words polished and venomous. The Willow Creek HOA regrets any unintended consequences of our maintenance efforts. Sarah Bennett's actions vandalizing equipment and inciting unrest they've endangered our community's stability. We urge residents to support order over chaos. Order. She'd used that word again, as if Effen's coughs and my burns were just collateral damage for her perfect lawns. I wasn't going to let her rewrite this. I called the lawyer, a sharp woman named Elena, who spoke like she'd been waiting her whole career to take down an HOA. "We've got her," Elena said, her voice crackling with energy. "No permits, no safety protocols, and a video of her giving the order. This is negligence, maybe criminal. I'm filing for an injunction to stop all HOA operations until the investigation's done." I hung up, my hands shaking, but my resolve ironclad. Ethan stirred, his eyes fluttering open. "Mom, is my fort gone?" His voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. I forced a smile, brushing his hair back. "It's still there, buddy, and we're building a bigger one, together." He grinned, weak but real. "With a dragon?" "With a whole army of dragons," I promised. I kissed his forehead, then went back to my laptop. Margaret had drawn a line in the dirt, and I was going to bury her in it. The injunction hit the hole like a sledgehammer. By the next morning, Elena had secured a court order barring Margaret and the board from issuing any directives or spending funds until the environmental and civil complaints were resolved. The news spread through the cul-de-sac like wildfire. Neighbors texted, called, showed up at my door with casseroles and coffee. Lisa organized a vigil for Ethan outside the hospital, with kids holding paper squirrels and signs that read, "Leaves are not the enemy." The local news covered it, zooming in on Mia, who'd painted a banner, "Fort Squirrel lives." But Margaret wasn't done. She called an emergency community meeting on Zoom, bypassing the injunction by claiming it was informal. I logged in from Ethan's hospital room, my laptop balanced on my knees. Margaret appeared on screen, her silver hair impeccable, her voice steady. "Residents of Willow Creek," she began, "we face a crisis instigated by one family's refusal to comply. Sarah Bennett has endangered our community by obstructing lawful maintenance and spreading misinformation. We propose an immediate vote to remove her from the association registry, effective tonight." The chat exploded. Neighbors typing, "This is insane, and you poisoned a kid." Mr. Callahan unmuted himself, his voice shaking with rage. "You sprayed chemicals near my grandkids, Margaret. You don't get to play victim." She didn't flinch. "Mr. Callahan, your emotional outburst doesn't change the facts. The HOA exists to protect property values, not indulge childish displays." I unmuted, my voice cutting through. "Childish displays? My son's in the hospital, Margaret. His lungs are damaged because you ordered an illegal chemical sprayed in our yard. You want to talk facts? I've got the vendor contract, the safety data sheet, and the video of you nodding to poison a kid's fort." The screen froze. Her connection, conveniently, dropped. But the damage was done. Neighbors were leaving the call, posting screenshots on X with captions like, "Margaret Voss just tried to expel a mom for protecting her son." By morning, the HOAS website crashed from traffic, and Leafgate was trending globally. I didn't stop there. I contacted EnviroSafe Solutions, recording the call. "This is Sarah Bennett. Your EcoClear Plus was used on my property without permits, hospitalizing my son. I need the authorization records, now. The manager stammered, Ms. Voss signed for it. She said it was for a park, not a residential yard. A park, I laughed, bitter. She lied. And I'm subpoenaing every document you've got. I sent the recording to Elena, who added it to the case file. The environmental agency confirmed EcoClear Plus was banned for residential use without dilution, and a state permit, neither of which Margaret had. The lawyer filed for criminal negligence charges, citing endangerment of a minor. The news ran with it, showing Ethan's hospital photo next to Margaret's HOA headshot. The caption read, "Who's the real threat to Willow Creek?" The retaliation came fast. 2 days later, I found my mailbox stuffed with unsigned flyers. Sarah Bennett's actions threaten your property. Values: support the HOA's vote to remove her or face increased dues. The next morning, someone had spray-painted "Comply" in black across my garage door. I recognized the paint, same brand as the HOA's compliance stencils. Same shade I'd seen in their storage shed when I'd volunteered years ago. Margaret wasn't just fighting, she was clawing for control, even as the ground crumbled beneath her. I didn't take the flyers down. I taped them to my front door, next to a laminated photo of Ethan's fort squirrel. Its leaves melted into sludge. Under it, I wrote in red marker, "You burned his world. You can't burn ours." By noon, the cul-de-sac was a rebellion again. Neighbors taped their own flyers, photos of their kids' leaf piles, stick forts, chalk drawings with messages like, "We stand with Ethan." Mia's mom organized a fort festival, where kids built new creations in every yard. The Wilsons twins made a leaf unicorn, complete with a tinfoil horn. Mr. Callahan added a second dragon, this one with a sign, "Margaret, your fire's out." I stood on my porch, watching the kids laugh, their hands covered in dirt and hope. Ethan was home now, his cough better, but his steps slow. He sat on the grass, adding a moat to a new, smaller fort. I handed him a stick, my throat tight. "You're unstoppable, buddy." He grinned. Like a dragon. The news crew showed up again, filming the festival. I held up Ethan's hospital wristband, my voice steady. "This is what Margaret Voss's standards cost. She sprayed poison near kids, lied about permits, and now she's threatening our homes. But look around, she can't stop us." The story went viral again, with national outlets picking it up. A petition to dissolve the HOA gained 10,000 signatures overnight. Elena called, her voice electric. The state's fast-tracking the environmental case. And the criminal charges? They're sticking. Margaret's facing jail time if we prove intent. I looked at Ethan, his small hands shaping leaves. "We'll prove it," I said. The courtroom was packed, not with cameras or chaos, but with the heavy silence of a community waiting for justice. I sat in the front row, Ethan's laminated fort squirrel drawing folded in my pocket like a talisman. He was with Lisa, too young for the trial but strong enough to tell me, "Mom, make it loud." I'd promised I would. Margaret arrived, her navy blazer replaced by a gray suit, her silver hair still pulled tight. She didn't carry her table, her hands were empty, shaking slightly as she sat beside her lawyer, a slick man with a briefcase that probably cost more than my car. She didn't look at me, but I felt her awareness like a predator sensing a threat. Judge Ramirez, a woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense tone, called the court to order. "We're here for Bennett v. Voss and related charges of criminal negligence and environmental violations. Counsel, proceed." Elena stood, her voice clear and cutting. "Your Honor, will show that Margaret Voss, acting as HOA president, knowingly authorized the use of a restricted chemical, EcoClear Plus, in a residential area without permits, endangering a minor and causing harm to Sarah Bennett. Will further prove she falsified vendor contracts, misused HOA funds, and retaliated against residents for exercising free speech." Margaret's lawyer stood, his voice smooth. "This was a tragic accident, Your Honor. My client acted within her authority to maintain community standards. The Bennett family's non-compliance escalated the situation." I clenched my fists, my burns itching under the bandages. Elena didn't let him finish. "Exhibit A," she said, projecting the video of Margaret nodding to the sprayer, Ethan coughing in the background. The courtroom gasped. "Exhibit B, the vendor contract, signed by Ms. Voss, claiming the chemical was for a park, not a residential yard. Exhibit C, the Environmental Agency's report, confirming EcoClear Plus's restricted status. Margaret's face paled, her hands gripping the table. The judge leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. Ms. Voss, did you verify the chemical safety for residential use? Margaret's lawyer whispered something, but she answered, her voice thin. I relied on the vendor's assurance it was safe. Elena pounced. You didn't read the safety data sheet. You didn't check for permits. You nodded to spray a known toxin near an 8-year-old. The room was silent, every eye on Margaret. She opened her mouth, then closed it. The judge didn't blink. I've seen enough for now. We'll proceed to trial on all charges. Ms. Voss, you're barred from any HOA authority, effective immediately. The board is suspended pending investigation. Margaret stood, her voice shaking. You can't, this community needs me. The judge's gavel slammed. You endangered a child, Ms. Voss. Sit down. I stood, unable to stop myself. Your Honor, may I speak? The courtroom tensed, but Ramirez nodded. I turned to Margaret, my voice steady. You called my son's fort a nuisance. You sprayed poison to erase his joy. You thought your rules made you untouchable, but you forgot something. This community isn't yours. It's ours. And we're done letting you burn what we love. The room erupted, neighbors clapping, some crying. Margaret's lawyer tried to object, but the judge silenced him. Mrs. Bennett, you've made your point. Court adjourned. Outside, neighbors waited, holding signs, Fort Squirrel forever. I pulled Effen's drawing from my pocket, holding it up. This is why we fought, I said, my voice breaking. For him. The final act wasn't in a courtroom. It was in the park, the same one where Margaret once banned kites for disrupting sightlines. Over 300 residents gathered, kids and parents, teachers and retirees, all standing on grass still scarred from her chemicals. A stage was set up, with 2 chairsen for the mayor, who'd promised to oversee the HOA's dissolution, and 1 for Ethan. He wore a green shirt with a squirrel patch Mia had sewn on. His cough gone, but his steps still careful. He held a stick crown, his eyes bright. Margaret showed up, uninvited, her gray suit replaced by a black coat. She stood at the edge, alone, her face a mask of defiance. No one clapped. No one spoke to her. She was a ghost of her own making. Ethan took the mick, his voice small but clear. I just wanted to build a fort for the squirrels. She said it was bad, but you all made more forts. You kept me safe. He looked at Margaret, his eyes unwavering. You tried to break my castle, but I'm still here. The crowd roared, a wave of applause that shook the ground. Margaret turned to leave, but someone stepped in her way. Judge Ramirez, in civilian clothes. Her arms crossed. The criminal trial starts Monday, she said, and the city's auditing every HOA decision you ever made. Margaret's face crumpled, her hands shaking. She walked away, her steps heavy, no longer the queen of Willow Creek. That night, I sat with Ethan on our porch, a new leaf pile in the yard, small but growing. He held a pinnacone, turning it over in his hands. She's really gone, isn't she? I nodded. And she's not coming back. He grinned. Can we build the biggest fort ever now? I laughed, pulling him close. Buddy, we'll build a whole kingdom. It started with leaves, just a pile of them, shaped by an 8-year-old's hands into a castle for squirrels. But power doesn't need a reason, only an excuse. Margaret didn't just burn a fort, she burned trust, safety. The idea that kids could play without fear. The real lesson wasn't about leaves or rules. It was about what happens when you push too far, when you try to silence a child's spark. She didn't count on a mother who'd fight like hell, neighbors who'd choose heart over fear, or a boy who'd keep building, no matter what. The cul-de-sac is different now. The HOA's gone, replaced by a community council that meets in the park, where kids draw chalk murals and build leaf forts without permits. Effen's Fort Squirrel is a landmark, sealed in protective resin with a plaque, for Ethan, who taught us to stand tall. Margaret's name is a cautionary tale, whispered in city halls and courtrooms. She faces charges: negligence, fraud, endangerment, and the audits uncovered years of her misusing funds, forging signatures, silencing dissent. The world changes not when power demands silence, but when the silenced fight back. Ethan's fort was small, but it grew roots no chemical could burn. And every time I see him stack leaves, I'm reminded the smallest spark can start a fire that changes everything. What about you? Have you faced a Margaret, someone who hid cruelty behind rules? What would you do if it was your child's fort? Share in the comments, even if it's just the number 9 to show you made it to the end. And if Ethan's story moved you, do 3 things: subscribe, like, share. Because no child should choke for dreaming, and no parent should fight alone. This isn't just a story, it's a call to pick up the leaves and build something unbreakable.